So hi everyone, good afternoon, and yeah, thanks again for everybody joining us today. And just as a brief introduction, I'm Savannah. I work across the NTDC and Heated, which is hosted by the University of Sheffield and tries to prioritise technicians in every way we can. And we're joined today by Helen Hooper, Liam Pearson-Noseworthy, Alison Gregory, and Sam Bowerbank. So yeah, thank you all very much for joining us. And just to say again that we are recording today's session just for people who aren't able to attend. And before I let Helen kind of take it away, just to go through the three sessions, it's part one of three today. You don't have to attend all three, you can attend whichever you will find most useful. Today's session is designed to be quite informal and hear from people who have gone through the fellowship process. Helen's going to do a bit of a brief introduction kind of into what it is, just so that everybody's on the same page. And yeah, please fire all your questions in. You can either raise your hand, come off mute, pop it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat, but do try and use this hour just as best you can to get the information. And part two, which is slightly more in detailed, Helen will go through the application process and what that looks like, and all the ins and outs and things that I don't particularly understand.
Yeah.
You can tune into kind of Helen's expertise in that one. And then part three is slightly different. It'll be a writing workshop. So you can join that to kind of go through the application writing process. And we're hoping to group people into the same levels, so you can do a bit of peer work and support each other at the same level. So do sign up to those. I'll make sure the links are sent out. Anyway, that's enough rambling from me. Helen, I'll let you crack on. I'll keep an eye on the chat as well,
right.
and let you know.
Brilliant. So you're going to pass over to me to start rumbling. So Savannah mentioned there that I've got a few brief introductory slides just to keep myself in order. So let's have a look. Okay, so Sam, Alison, and Liam have already said hello. And maybe when we come to the main body of today's workshop, you can say a bit more about yourselves and where you work and what you do. I'll basically just kick off by explaining, I suppose, what's most relevant about my experience as an academic for this workshop. So I nearly said applied sciences then, Sam. I don't sit in applied sciences anymore. I sit in the school. We've just recently restructured and I'm still learning all the names. So I currently sit in the School of Geography and Natural Sciences, but I come from a molecular biology background. And Northumbria University has got an AdvanceHE accredited professional recognition scheme. So that's the process whereby staff within the university who've got experience of teaching and learning can apply to become recognised as one of the four descriptors of Fellowship of AdvanceHE. So I'm a senior fellow, and that's what the letters after my name are, SFHEA. Sam and Liam are senior fellows, and Alison is an associate fellow. As part of that scheme, AdvanceHE requires a certain number of staff to become trained mentors, trained reviewers, and then normal quality assurance processes apply to staff making applications to become a fellow. So there's also a moderation process, and I'm part of that moderator bank. And I also sit on the NUPRS, the Northumbria University Professional Recognition Scheme Management Group. So when the university got that accredited scheme set up, the focus, quite rightly, was on making sure that academic staff came in and they were inducted properly into their learning and teaching activities. They were given access to various teaching and learning CPD, and they were really, really encouraged. And at one point in time, the university put an objective for new academic staff without a teaching qualification to become recognised as fellows of AdvanceHE. And that's great, obviously, because students are going to benefit from academic staff being properly trained, inducted, supported, and recognised as fellows. But what I kind of realised, because I sit in a department with 10 labs and brilliant technicians running those labs, and I was really, really aware that the students often found the best bit of their degrees were the stuff they were doing in the labs, and who was running and who was in charge and who was really, really instrumental in a great learning experience in those labs were the technicians. So at that point in time, I kind of recognised that Northumbria, but I don't think it's just Northumbria, had a little bit of an institutional blind spot when it came to recognising that students benefit from all staff who teach or support their learning being properly inducted and supported and recognised for their role in that student learning experience. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that, as well as contributing to the CPD for academic staff at the university, I set up and I lead the sessions in support of technicians and professional services staff to engage in that system as well. Luckily, a couple of years ago, I persuaded Sam, I gently twisted Sam's arm to say, come along, Sam, and help me do this, give a technical perspective. And this kind of like grown into this thing here. So in terms of the aims of the workshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically, I'm not going to assume any prior knowledge. And there's a couple of slides to just say what actually is AdvanceHE, what is fellowship at AdvanceHE. The visibility across the visibility, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but there may be the recognition of fellowship. Is that high across the sector? Who is fellowship for? I'm going to kind of try to dispel some common misconceptions that still exist across the sector about who fellowship is for. And at that point in time, hopefully, I'm going to really start to, I'm a nosy person and I'm going to really enjoy listening to Liam, to Alison and to Sam's perspectives about why they went for fellowship, how they found the process, and any advice, if they could travel back in time, they'd give to themselves now about maybe how to engage in the process. And then I think right at the end, I'll hand back to Savannah, who can just remind you if anybody's interested in the other two parts to this mini workshop series. So in terms of then kicking off with some basic definitions, I suppose. So AdvanceHE is the national charitable organisation that exists with one main aim, and that is to enhance teaching quality in higher education. So it's really focused on making sure that the students who go to our institutes have a really great time. And the best way to do that is to basically support staff who teach and support their learnings, professional development, and to make sure that everything is inclusive. So they really, really do aim to promote equality, diversity and inclusion across the HE sector. And by supporting staff and making sure that practice is inclusive, that's the best way to overall enhance teaching quality. Now, I'm a senior fellow of AdvanceHE. The letters after my name is SFHEA. Where does HEA come from? That comes from the fact that AdvanceHE was formed from the merger of various bodies, including the Higher Education Academy. One of the reasons why I say that is if you try and search for information at your own institute, because your own institution might also have an AdvanceHE accredited professional recognition scheme, often if you search for HEA, you won't get anything back. So you have to search for AdvanceHE or professional recognition scheme or something. Anyway, now, so AdvanceHE, that's the kind of national body which exists to promote and enhance teaching quality across the sector. And that body awards fellowship as an external professional recognition of effective practice in teaching and learning in HE. So that's what fellowship is, that's what AdvanceHE is. So in terms of visibility or recognition across the sector, so since early last year, there's more than 200,000 fellows. So more than 200,000 people have successfully become fellows of AdvanceHE. So that's quite a lot. Most of those fellows are in the UK, but it's now an international scheme. So I think it's become really, really successful because there are very few alternatives. So in terms of a breakdown, there are 4 kind of descriptors or categories. There's just under 47,000 associate fellows. The majority of fellows are fellows, that's descriptor 2, just under 130,000. About 23,000 senior fellows and about 2,000 principal fellows. And I'm absolutely positive that these figures will be out of date because engagement with the scheme over the trend is upwards. It's going out. Why is the trend upwards? And I think it is because it's become increasingly an international teaching qualification and maybe a shorthand or a benchmark for teaching quality in HE. And it's absolutely routinely used now in recruitment and promotion. And I've kind of bracketed academic here. So, for example, at Northumbria, if you don't have an accepted teaching qualification upon appointment as part of your probation, an objective is to become a fellow of AdvanceHE. And I think that's pretty routine across all the institutions that I know staff in. I'm bracketing academic because, again, I'll be interested to hear Lee and Alison and Sam's perspectives on this. I think I've seen it creeping in to technical job adverts as a desirable criteria. So I don't know whether or not you've seen that in, when you've been looking around and about, or maybe you've been involved in designing job adverts. So a fellowship, I suppose, shorthand here, it means something in academia, not just in UK academia. So it's a very kind of like common thing on the academic side. Now, I came across a report the other day that basically said in the last TEF, so Teaching Excellence Framework round, so institutes, I suppose it's the counterpart to REF, the Research Excellence Framework. So institutions, when they submit to become recognised as TEF, go through that TEF application process, 20%. So 1 in 5 institutions who submitted a TEF application referenced technical pedagogies as an excellent part of their teaching and learning. So, I think maybe the number of technicians and professional support services staff who are recognised is behind the curve, the academic curve, but it's growing. So who is fellowship for? And I think this is one of the kind of main misconceptions I'm just going to tackle first. So I think there is still some misconceptions surrounding that fellowship is only for academics. There are 4 descriptors, so associate, fellow, senior fellow and principal, and maybe only academics can apply for them all. There's some confusion that technicians and professional services staff can only become associate fellows. Absolute rubbish. So I've literally cut and pasted this from the Professional Standards Framework 2023. It's an inclusive framework and it recognises the practice of all professionals who play a role in teaching and supporting learning. So this is nothing to do with the fact that you're an academic. It is nothing to do with your grade of employment. It is to do simply with whether or not you can draw from your practice evidence to satisfy that you are an effective teacher or effective at supporting students' learning in your specific context. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide in any detail whatsoever. This is the focus of the second workshop in the series. In the second workshop in the series, we'll really dig into the Professional Standards Framework 2023. So, award of fellowship, how you go about gaining external professional recognition of your effective teaching and learning practice is to make an application to AdvanceHE to explain how your practice aligns with this framework, with the Professional Standards Framework 2023. It's organised around 3 dimensions of, I'm going to say, practice, areas of activity, so what professionals in HE do on a daily basis, core knowledge, so the skills, the experiences, the qualifications we possess to make us effective in the areas of activity that we do, and last but not least, professional values. So we are inclusive individuals who treat people with respect in those kinds of activities that we do. So there are 3 dimensions of practice, there's various statements, and recognition is in 4 categories. Now, Savannah, when you introduced that, you said levels, and it's not levels. I can say this a million times. I know everybody completely ignores people who say it. They're not levels. It's not hierarchical. And both Sam and Liam, I think, are perfect examples of this, because you're senior fellows and you didn't have to work your way through in a hierarchical manner. you basically apply for the category, the descriptor that best suits your role. Sometimes this is pragmatic because, say, descriptor 4 is far more lengthy and it takes more time to apply for. So sometimes, even though you might have evidence to satisfy senior fellow, if you don't have time to write the application, pragmatically, you might want to apply for associate fellow. So the only reason why I'm mentioning this is to just explain what the difference in the letters are, the difference in categories, and to maybe link forward to that second workshop, which is going to be digging into all of these this information. So this is the point, I think, at which I'm going to invite anybody with any initial questions to please shout. And I'm actually now going to hopefully enjoy listening to Sam, to Alison, and to Liam talk a bit more about their experiences. So I'm maybe going to stop sharing because then I can keep an eye on the chat as well. And I wonder if there's any initial questions I could field from anybody before I start inviting Liam, Sam, and Alison to take the lead.
Just to jump in quickly, Helen, just to say that people are welcome to ask questions or make comments either on by speaking and coming off mute or raising a hand or using the chat, just whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yeah. So if there's nothing immediately that anybody wants to shout about, I'm going to maybe go in reverse alphabetical order. Liam, do you want to kick off and just maybe say, explain who you are and what you do, and then we'll do a bit of a round robin and take it from there. Go on.
Yeah. First of all, can you hear me? Okay, great. So my name's Liam. I'm one of the technicians here at Sport. In sports department, I've been here for 16 years in many different roles. I literally started working up in the gym, and then progressed my way through education, and then ended up back here as a technician. I left a little bit to work in industry and sport, but for the past 6 years, I've been here working as a technician.
Alison, do you want to take it away?
Hi everyone, my name's Alison Gregory and I'm currently the Technical Manager for Education and Medical Sciences at Newcastle University. And when I did my Associate Fellow, I was in the role below that, which is a Technical Team Leader of the Biomedical Sciences Department. And we predominantly deliver practical class teaching across all the medical sciences, dentistry, pharmacy, medicine, and biomed, nutrition, and sports science. So I've been in that kind of role, my first role, for around 10 years now. Yeah.
And Sam, last but not least.
Hi, so I'm Samantha Barbank. I've worked at Northumbria since 2013, starting out as technician and then getting promoted to senior technician. So I run the chromatography facility and supporting teaching practicals as well as research across all of the courses that was the old applied sciences, now science and environment, or whatever the new name is. So that covers food, biology, biochemistry, biomedical sciences, nutrition, chemistry, forensic science. All of those come through my lab at one point or another over the course of their degree.
Got your mic unmuted. Do you maybe want to say something about your journey through the kind of fellowship scheme that exists in Northumbria? Because you're a really, well, the first of two examples which demonstrates that the different descriptors are not hierarchical. So you did, if I remember right, you did Associate Fellow first, and then you didn't do Fellowship. You skipped that because you didn't need to. It's not hierarchical, and then you did Senior Fellowship. So maybe do you want to just talk through that process?
Yep, that's not a problem. So as Helen said, I first went through and applied for the Associate Fellow. That was purely based on my experience and what I was doing in my job role at the time. So at that time, I was technician. So I was leading practicals, supporting practicals, and giving informal feedback, that kind of stuff to the students. But at that stage in my career, I didn't have enough to go for the Senior Fellow, because part of that is imposing your knowledge and expertise onto other people and kind of mentoring. So after I got promoted to Senior Fellow, I was then responsible for line managing our apprentices in the department. So as part of that and mentoring, I think it's been 6 apprentices now through their apprenticeship program on both degree and the BTEC level apprenticeship. So as part of that, I was then able to document that mentorship and that sustained passing on of knowledge for a duration of time. So that allowed me to then apply for the senior fellow. So I went through the application again and applied for the senior fellow, incorporating all of those new aspects of my role into that application.
Can you remind me how much time passed between your associate fellow? So your associate fellow, you came in and you did it, and you came into HE without any other experience, didn't you? So your associate fellowship was based on quite specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I do is very narrow, very specialist. So that's associate fellow does fit very well into that, because you've only got to tick off a certain amount of the areas of activity. So that is often linked to having very specialist skills, very specialist role. So yeah, I hadn't had any other experience in higher education before that. I'd worked in industry. So I think I'd been at the university for maybe 3 years when I applied for that, I think, somewhere around about 2016, 2017, I think. And then it was probably somewhere around about 2021, because it was after we came back after COVID. I remember that much. So somewhere around about then that I went for the senior fellow.
Yeah, great. Let's go forward then. Alison, so can you say a bit about your kind of experience with applying for fellowship at Newcastle? So when you did it, why you did it, why you went for associate fellow, all those kind of things. Yeah.
I think, I suppose the key point, you've hit on it a lot already, is I didn't really recognize what I was doing and that it was eligible to apply for that. And it was really down to, I was working at the time in the practical classes. Physiology was our area of expertise, and I worked really closely with my academic lead, to develop resources to improve the practicals, giving feedback to the students, and all of those kinds of things, designing instruction guides for them for use in the sessions, making sure everything, the teaching environment was right and everything. And it was down to her, actually, who said, you should be going for some kind of like associate fellow was what initially thought. And I was like, surely not. And then it was just her motivation that sort of led me to it. But when I discovered then at Newcastle, through our learning and teaching development service, we have a really good system. And I simply registered for a workshop with that group, which is open to any colleague who wants to consider, regardless of your staff family. Attended that initial workshop and got the information on how to start to put together the evidence. So I was assigned a mentor who was completely separate from my area. It was an English academic who kind of helped me with my application. And then, like yourselves, Helen, we're accredited. So I went through that application and with my mentor, with her feedback, and then that was put forward to the panel, I guess, and then I got it from there. But I think for this audience as well, I know it's not hierarchical, but obviously at associate fellow, you're looking at maybe evidence in 2 areas of activity rather than the full 5. So a bit like Sam, I didn't feel I had maybe more areas of activity around the kind of assessment, feedback, mentor, and that kind of thing. But I was amazed at the amount of evidence that I had for that, to go for the associate fellowship. So my evidence was all around kind of how I support students with equipment, producing the information guides, but also things like laboratory adjustments, at making education accessible for all of our students. A big part of my role was kind of meeting with our students with support plans and seeing what I could do to ensure that they had an equitable experience in the laboratory. So that all, I'd had no idea that would feed into an application, which was amazing. So that's how I kind of kicked it off.
So Alison, I know a little bit about your practice, and I'm personally speaking, I'm absolutely confident that you've got loads of evidence to apply for fellowship, senior fellowship.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about doing that maybe in the future? Is it a lack of time?
I think it's been a lack of time, but I think because so few, this was a few years ago, probably round about COVID that I got mine, so few technicians were even aware of it at the time. I went on a bit of a advocacy kind of mission, really, and to get more of my colleagues bringing along with me, really. So I did actually end up getting a promotion. I think, was this partly to do with this, being more aware of my practice, because I'm now a technical manager for education for the faculty rather than just one school. And I think it probably was because, yes, I've got some initials, but it's more about the actual, how you're reflecting on your own performance and how you want to support teaching and learning. So, I think now that I'm in this role, I'm actually really proud that we've got 2 fellows now. We've got another 7 got associate fellows within just my small community of 20 odd or so that I look after in medical sciences. So maybe it's time to go back to myself and have a look at doing something extra.
Yeah, brilliant. And Liam, am I right in thinking that when you became a fellow, you simply applied for senior fellow, or did you apply for something else before that?
Yeah, unfortunately not. So I've done the same route as Sam. I went from associate to fellow, to senior.
Does your kind of experience mirror Sam in the sense that you came in without any prior HE experience and thought associate fellow fits me best, and then with a couple of years, because I think you mentor your line managees, because I know that you've helped a number of your line managees to become associate fellows or fellows, and then after a certain amount of time you then went for senior fellowship yourself. Do you want to just talk me through my very badly scrambled version of
Yeah, so if it helps, I've wrote like just a little bit about like motivations to engage in the fellowship, because I feel like if I write things down, it stops us rambling. So if people can literally see us reading it and or it sounds like I am, like I just want to say that I am, because it stops exactly what I'm doing now. So I came about it from like a slightly different angle in terms of, like you mentioned, as a technician rather than an academic. And at the start, it was all about kind of trying to improve the credentials of the technicians. That was one of my early goals back when I went for AFHEA. And now it's kind of a prerequisite and an expectation of technicians, at least within the sports department. So, because I was doing things like I was overhauling PEPs, which is lesson plans, restructuring timetable or helping timetabling, but what I was also doing is supporting learning for the students outside of just like equipment maintenance. I was supporting lessons. So that's how I felt that I had the ability to actually apply for AFHA, because I was supporting teaching. Um, and then I've done some research as well, but what the process gave us was a structured way to reflect on what I was actually doing. And this is one of the things I'd say people should do. Write things down and reflect on what you're doing, because it gives you a structure which you can then use to literally almost copy and paste into your AFHA application. And then my having AFHA already progressing to senior fellowship kind of just felt like the natural step in responsibilities, because mainly for me, I went from supporting teaching to leading teaching. So because I had line manager experience as well, because of the senior role, and then I was leading teaching, both of those kind of just felt like the natural step from associate to senior. You're on mute, Ellen.
Thank you. Again, while you're unmuted, I wonder if we could maybe take it a step forward, and could you talk about the actual process of putting an application together? So at Northumbria and in many institutes, if you've got experience and you're applying through the accredited experiential route, you have to write an application. And I think many staff, academic staff, really struggle with that writing process because it's reflective. I don't know whether you also find that difficult, or if there's any advice you can maybe give about
just be
that writing process.
straightforward. You don't have to necessarily reflect per se. Literally just say what you're doing. That in and of itself is almost reflective. If you say what you're doing, how it affects students, staff, whatever it is that you've done, I think that in and of itself is a reflection, because by just saying what you're doing and writing it down and then saying the cause of that it is a reflect. But once you ask people to reflect, I think it's just the terminology. People are like, oh, I can't do that, I don't want to do it. But if you just say what you've done, how it's affected people or whatever it is that you've done, that is in and of itself. But I also believe that, remember, well, you might not remember, this is why I'm bringing it up, that you had to fight quite hard for my application because it was a technician's one. It wasn't like an academic one. Now it's probably quite different, that they are a bit more accepting of non-academic applications. But mine had to go through, I think it was like we'd done the 2 rounds of peer review, but then a third person had to come in, but then you had to come in after that to be like, nah, you are marking this as an academic one, and it's just not. And I think the new rules and things have improved the technical ability or the technician's ability to get any kind of fellowship now.
So what I would just say about that, Liam, is that I think you were the first. I think you were the first senior fellow technician in the event. Was it you, Sam? Okay, yeah. So you were quite close together. But what Liam got was an academic reviewer, because there were no technical reviewers at that point in time. An academic reviewer who basically rejected your application on the grounds that you were simply a technician.
Yeah.
So I did it to point out that basically that meant that we had to update our reviewer training and the guidance to reviewers to make it absolutely explicitly clear that that was a misunderstanding, and there was no restriction based on any role, descriptor, grade, or anything. It was simply about the evidence of the practice. And I do think that has become a bit clearer at Northumbria, because I think you were the test case. So sorry about that, but
No, it is what it is. That was kind of why I'd done it in the first place, to kind of
positive outcome. Sam, can I pass over to you, because what Liam was mentioning there about trying to get comfortable with reflective writing, you always say about the STAR methodology. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's something that's well known in interview techniques. So STAR stands for setting the scene, the task, the action, and the reward of what happened. So basically, pretty self-explanatory. You say what it was that you were doing, what you physically did. So for my example, I think it was something to do around rearranging the lab to make it a little bit more fluid and flowing for the students. How I physically did that. So how I wanted to do it, the actions that I took, and then the benefit to the students in the end. And I would also say in that R section, try if you can to include student feedback. It doesn't have to be something that's formal, because I know as us as technicians, we can't see the student things on the module feedback forms and things like that. So literally, I asked the students, asked them if they either verbally or just drop as a quick thing in an email, and it just makes that little bit more impactfulness if you've got and it doesn't have to be anything lengthy. It can be a sentence, 2 sentences, something like that, just so you can pop that in. So it gets you into a way of just thinking about it as an overall piece and then being able to break it down. Because the one thing I would say is be explicit in what you're doing. So in our university, we get reviewed by someone outside of our department. So it's no good for me to just say I ran a lab class, because they're like, well, I work in law. What's a lab class? What do you actually do? Be explicit in what you're doing and how it benefits and the practices and stuff that you're doing as well.
Great point, Sam. So I think most institutes who've got an accredited scheme will, as part of the quality assurance process, ensure that applications are reviewed completely separately from the department or the school or the faculty. And I love that, because as a nosy person, I get to find out brilliant practice in areas that I know nothing about. And I'm an unashamed, like magpie, oh my goodness, that's good. And I'm nabbing that, and I'm going to enhance my own practice by finding out about that. So yes, please, I think it's very easy to take for granted what you do. Don't take it for granted. Exactly as Sam's just said, really explain your context. So I'm a technician in this department. This is what I do. This is how it impacts on the students. This is the problem that I was faced with, and this is what I did to enhance it. And this is what the students thought about what I did. So that lovely, nice STAR reflective kind of methodology, really make it clear. It's not the time to be shy about your own practice. It's the time to be I'm desperately trying not to think about a friend of mine who's saying, I'm just going to say, she says, you've got to be Billy Big Balls when it comes to writing these applications. You really do have to stake a claim and be confident about the impact of your practice on students. Alison, do you want to maybe say something? How did you feel about the writing and the application at Newcastle? Similar or different?
Yeah, a bit similar. I think the STAR thing's really good, and I think the thing that's what I needed. Breaking it down into an example was exactly what I needed to do. So for me, it was that end bit actually, Helen, and what Sam's indicated as well. It's what was the impact on the students? Can you show? So if we designed something, it was a bit better in terms of an instruction sheet, but then I realised I hadn't made it accessible. So I put, in terms of maybe like dyslexia. So I looked at the type of paper it was on, for example. So there was just that kind of iterative process of improvement and feedback from the students. And I didn't realize that that is actually what was needed. I think something that I would touch on from me, not having had any teaching qualifications or teaching practice background, and being a technician and a lab scientist really all my career, was kind of the kind of pedagogic word, the teaching practice word. It may have slightly changed from when I did my application, but there was a need to kind of evidence some literature and some teaching practice, which I found a little bit challenging. But I know that's probably moving on a little bit more now. And at Newcastle, actually, they've created a nice sort of Canvas module for anybody who gets involved in the initial workshop that I talked about before. You can now access a Canvas module, which has got some really nice sort of teaching practice information that helps you kind of set that context a little bit as well. So I just think I would encourage people not to be frightened if you're about that kind of side of it.
So it's funny you were saying about so part of the application process requires you to be really clear about what you're doing. So to provide a rationale for the activities that you're doing. And I would say that the most complaints from academic colleagues who I mentor or help is just that. I don't know anything about pedagogy. I don't know anything about that. I'm the expert in molecular biology or toxicology. Mm-hmm. So it's exactly the same for everybody in terms of going through that process of saying, actually, what the scheme is just asking me to do is to just make it clear what my rationale is. Yeah. And once I think you've made that mental switch, it's okay. Yeah. But I think there's a question from Ralph. Savannah, you noticed? Ralph, do you know?
Sorry, Ralph. Do just shout.
Yes. I have been told that they tend to ask you when you're in your application to only look at what you've done at wherever you are in the last 2 or 3 years. But in the last decade, I spent nearly 8 years training architects, teaching, whatever you want to call it, to make their own models, to use machinery, to use laser cutters. I came up with the training. I had some extremely difficult training sessions because we didn't speak the same language, and I had to come up with a way of doing the training session. But that was all last decade, and that was in industry. And I'm just a bit worried. I would like to include that in my application because it very much shows what I am capable of, what I have done. And to be quite honest, it all still seems like yesterday. But I had been told, well, unfortunately, that doesn't count. And to me, just sounds like, well, that's just another wall.
I'm going to try and field your question, but if I don't, and if I go down a rabbit hole, Ralph, please follow up. And Sam, Alison and Liam, please chip in as well. So what AdvanceHE wants to see in an application is evidence that you remain in good standing, so that your current practice is well informed by continuous professional development, and your current practice is having a positive impact on students. So that's what AdvanceHE want to do. So in terms of what you've developed in industry, I'm imagining, because it would seem a bit daft not to think this way, I suppose, is that all of those excellent skills, approaches, all of the ways in which you've attempted to translate complex stuff to learners coming from different backgrounds, you've brought that with you as a kind of brilliant toolkit to apply to your local context. So even though you might not be doing exactly the same thing in your institution, I would imagine that what you're doing is being fully informed by that previous experience. So most university accredited schemes will want the main bulk of your application to evidence your impact on their own students, because the university is paying AdvanceHE quite a lot of money to set up an institutional scheme. So I suppose if you're thinking about it from an institutional perspective, you really want to see that, you know, your all this money you're paying to AdvanceHE is actually impacting on the institution students. So I don't think so. So coming back to your situation, the main body of your application wouldn't really be talking about what you did 10 years ago in industry, but that would be super relevant to explain how your practice currently, which is impacting brilliantly on students, has been informed by that experience. And you can use that to explain the rationale and the impact you're having currently. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I had to say is essentially quite a bit of what I do today is actually completely based on what I did 10, 15 years ago in industry, because I found out then what worked and what didn't work. In the main thing being that if you're teaching a practical subject, it's no point in just whittering on and expecting people for 2 hours and expecting people to take it all in. You actually have to get them doing something and actually.
You can do to compare and contrast the learning experiences of individuals in industry with university students, and there's some really nice commentary you uniquely can talk about there in terms of, you know, that the skills that students you're teaching are transferable to industry and therefore they're also enhancing their employability. So even though your application is not going to be talking about the 10 years ago stuff you did there, it's still highly relevant, but just explain it in the context of what you're doing currently in your institution. And I think, to be honest, I think that's fair enough. So maybe somebody's just got the slight wrong end of the stick in terms of saying that's not relevant, don't talk about it, because it is, but it just has to be discussed in your current practice. Liam, I think you were going to chip in as well, weren't you?
I was going to say that I used an actual same example, Ralph, but obviously just in a different context. So I've done a lot of work with a Team GB downhill ski slope athlete, which wasn't anything relevant to the Northumbria, but I included what I learned in that, in how it influences how I teach the students, what I teach them. So yeah, you can use, because I did, so you can.
Great, that's good to know. But I must admit, the other thing is that I actually just lately been doing a lot of training of staff so they can do stuff for students.
So that's where, like, that's the difference between like associate and fellow, and then kind of dipping into senior. So you might want to have a look at which one you actually think is actually relevant for you to apply for. Because if you're training people that has an effect on other people, you're now looking at different applications.
Right, yeah. That's what I thought. I must admit, I was possibly looking at trying fellow, but I was discouraged from doing it.
Nah, go for it.
So I think on paper, anybody can make an application for any descriptor. But what I've found from speaking to lots of people across the sector is often the central quality enhancement teams are very small and there's often very limited resources. So sometimes academic staff with maybe probationary objectives get prioritised. But there's often a way around things. So if it's just because of misconceptions, you can, you know, politely correct somebody. If it's to do with limited resources, there's often ways you can, you know, maybe shuffle around things. I'm picking up on, so, you know, Ralph, if you've got solid evidence for associate, maybe fellowship, you might have some evidence for senior fellowship. So the D3-ness or the senior fellowship element is all to do with sustained evidence of impact on others who teach or support student learning. So if anybody is working with academics or PGRs or other technicians who then go on to teach or support student learning, that's perfect for senior fellowship. If you're unsure, Sam, I think, has just put a link to the AdvanceHE Fellowship descriptor tool. So this tool is free to use. It asks you something like, I don't know, 10 questions or so, I can't remember, but it asks you something like 10 questions and you fill it in, and then it emails you back with a kind of pie chart saying where your evidence sits and maybe which is the best descriptor for you. I think it's useful as a reflective tool. I'm not 100% convinced about how accurate it is, because I've tried it a few times and I've got different responses. And that may be because I'm a bit of a woolly person and on some day, or maybe it's because I forget things. So it's a really useful tool. Please go and try it. It is free. It only takes 10 minutes, but I don't think it's like 100% accurate. Go on, Savannah.
I think Sam's posted a link to it in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that
I
right,
have, yeah.
Sam? Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the decision tool. And just another point as well that I just don't want to miss anything from the chat. I'm just aware of time. Amanda, you asked a question about evidencing from literacy and from literature, and I'm just wondering if you're happy with if we were to send through the page from Northumbria, if that feels like it would answer your question, or if you want to discuss a bit further.
Well, I would certainly like to see the literature for Northumbria. So I've been dabbling in doing this application for quite some time, and I've got to the point now where I've been asked to basically look at the literature and put some examples in to support the actual evidence of my practice. And although the lady who is my mentor, who's an academic member of staff, has sent me some literature through, it's quite overwhelming, and I'm not really sure if any of it actually is suitable to match to my practice in that way. It's not something I've really looked into massively, and so my application has basically just gone on the to do later pile until I find a way to get my head around it, if that makes sense.
What discipline you sit in, or what service you provide?
So I'm a technical member of staff. My department is geography. However, like my main discipline is analytical chemistry. I'm primarily in the research support, but because we're such a small institution, all of us do some teaching and some research. I initially went for associate fellow because, as everyone else, you kind of think, well, I'll start at the bottom. I can maybe evidence a few things initially. So that's kind of what area I'm coming from.
Yeah. So I think I'm reading between the lines, but maybe your academic mentor has sent you some like full-blown pedagogical research papers. And yeah, gosh, unless you're into that specific area, they're quite hard going, like any kind of research paper that you're not really familiar with is. But I think it depends. The pedagogical literature you should use or not use, because it doesn't say, again, in the scheme, it doesn't say you need to cite pedagogical literature. What it says is you need to refer to the appropriate scholarship that is relevant to your application. So if your application maybe is focusing on enhancing diverse groups, so it's an inclusion piece. So Alison said that she kind of made various guides more inclusive for students with dyslexia. So that might be within biomedical sciences or physiotherapy, but actually it's nothing to do with the students, it's to do with the learning difficulty. So it kind of depends on the nature of what your practice is going to focus on, but it doesn't need to be full-blown pedagogical research articles. It needs to be appropriate literature. One thing I would say that I think is relevant, maybe I'm tempted to say to all technical applications, but maybe that's stretched, because I'm sure somebody will say, well, it's not relevant to mine, but something like Kolb's experiential learning cycle. Now, that's a huge kind of like bunch of words, right? Kolb's experiential learning cycle. But if anybody Googles Kolb, you'll come up with his papers, and he proposes a model. Now, the words are technical, they're quite difficult to get your head around, but what Kolb's experiential learning cycle is all about, students having some kind of difficulty, they need to learn something, they go and have a concrete practical experience. So that could be in a lab, it could be in a workshop, it could be building a model that Ralph is teaching them how to do. So they've got some kind of learning need, they go and have a concrete experience, they learn from doing, and then they go back and they enhance their knowledge, and then they have a new thing that they need to learn. So Kolb's experiential learning cycle, I think, is a kind of generic model that mostly every technical application can apply to their own situation. But what I would say is, please don't get too caught up with the pedagogical literature. Think about what you're doing, and is it best then to go and have a look for scholarship in maybe assessment learning, in inclusion, in the disciplines, or some disciplines of, they call them, again, fancy words, signature pedagogies. So in architecture, Ralph, it will be all about building models, because that's really important for students to like take this theory in their head and demonstrate something 3D. But I can see Liam and Sam, you want to chip in, and maybe Amanda, you want to ask a follow-up.
Yeah, so all I want to say is I think the academics took it a bit too literate. I'm going to read a couple of notes I've just mentioned here. Amanda, you only need to mention the general topic or the general idea of whatever pedagogy you're using. You don't have to like talk about the intricacies. And people might be against this, but I'm going to mention it in anyways. What you can do is you can use AI just to say, look, I teach in this kind of way. These are my type of lessons. This is what I do. What kind of pedagogy would this fall under? It'll give you the typical terms, like the big fancy words. You can then just go and find, like go in PubMed, you can then find some references, some papers that would reference or talk about that type of teaching. So you don't have to go too deep into it, just talk about the surface level.
You know, I'm a dinosaur, so if you use AI like a study buddy, that's great. But I'm a dinosaur, and I would go to something like the National Technician Development Centre and look at all their reports as really, or as a professional body who publishes reports that are actually comprehensible and far more easier to read than a full-blown pedagogical research article.
Yeah.
So yeah, AI is a study buddy, that's great. As a dinosaur, I like professional bodies that do the work for me and put it into reports I can read far easier. Go on, Sam, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, so basically Helen's covered it a little bit, so I was going to add in about that experiential way of teaching. I work in a very similar area, so I'm chromatography analytical chemistry. So if you would like me to share some of what I included in mine, I'm more than happy to. If you just want to drop us an email, it's just my name, so samantha.bowerbank@northumbria.ac.uk. If you drop us an email, I can send some of what I used over to you. But yeah, focus on the way students learn by hands-on and experiential stuff was the ones I went for over the heavy-hitting academic type ones.
You can't really blame an academic for advising you to look at research articles, you know, especially if they're on the paper, they get an extra citation, don't they?
Yeah.
But I think some of this, so here's a call to arms for anybody on the call. So once you become a fellow, please also sign up to become a reviewer and a mentor, because I think some of the access issues for academics, outside academic staff, family groups, is there's no representation. So it's a chicken and the egg. The more technicians and staff from professional services who can become trained mentors and trained reviewers, you will change the system and you will continually improve the information and the examples and the accessibility of the system to other staff groups. So a little bit of a call for arms to yourselves, really. Amanda, have you got a follow-up question? Okay. Now, I could talk about this for ages. Go on, Amanda.
I just wanted to say that's one of the challenges here at Durham is that we don't have any technical support for the application. We only have the traditional academic route, which makes it really difficult because we have these challenges around what does an technical application look like.
I think that's something I think Helen and I we've been speaking about. Perhaps these series of workshops will help that as well. But maybe there is something along that line. And I know that with myself, we did a little sort of writing session for an afternoon with our sports techs actually, and to get all of their information together. And I think there's maybe something about us connecting across the universities, Amanda, to sort of help each other out with that. As a group of technicians, I know we need to feed in, and absolutely, I actually like the process and I like the academic input into the application. So I don't want it to sort of sound as though it would be siloing into a kind of just, we have to, but I think we do need that support and help from fellow technicians, I think would be really useful.
Yeah. Savannah, am I right in thinking this is supposed to, I don't want to stop useful conversation, but are we only scheduled for an hour? Is that right?
Yeah, we are only scheduled for an hour. The next session is an hour and a half. for the kind of delving in. I think that includes time for questions, Helen.
Right. So maybe I'll just, so as a wrap up, so thank you very, very much, Liam, Alison and Sam. I think you brought the kind of, sometimes it's quite dry and difficult to understand how these kinds of systems apply to you. So I think you've given a really nice range of experiences and perspectives. But if I suppose you've kind of gained confidence that this process is relevant to you, Savannah's put on another couple of workshops. So do you want to say anything about the other workshop? I haven't got the dates in there because I couldn't remember where they were, Savannah, but do you want to?
Yeah, that's fine. I've just popped them in the chat, but I will also send them out to anybody who registered for today, just because I know some people have dropped off since joining the call, but they're basically 1 week. So there's 2 more. And the next one is next Wednesday, 12 till 1:30. And then part 3, which is the writing workshop, that might be one that people might need to do a little bit more in terms of fitting it into their calendar. So that's 2:30 until 4. And so that's 2 weeks today. So if you are interested in joining the writing session, that one won't be recorded because we're hoping to group people into not levels, Helen. Absolutely not levels, but we are hoping to group people so that they can peer support one another. Any questions, just drop us an email. And if you can't attend the second one, that will be recorded. So that's where you'll go into the framework and things, Helen, in a bit more detail. But obviously there are quite a lot of questions from people. So if you can attend them all, it should be quite useful. And I guess if there was space for more writing workshops in the future, Helen and Alison, that we can facilitate across institutions, then we will try and do that.
Yeah, great.
Someone's going to go and fly a drone, apparently. Have fun with that, Annette.
I've got a bit of time now, so if anybody's got any questions, I'm more than happy to stay in the call and field them. But other than that, really nice to see everybody. Thank you very much, Alison, Liam and Sam once more. And have a good rest of the day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Sam.